Welcome to episode 2 and series 2 of the Back in My Day podcast. This week's guest is Maureen Pelling. Maureen has had a remarkable life which started with travel and adventure from a very young age. This was due to her father being a military doctor and saw her live in places such as the Falklands, Uganda, Kenya and the UK. So plenty of great stories and adventure from the early years of her life, and that's inspired her to follow in her dad's footsteps and become an army nurse. She then met a husband who was in the military as well, so those travels and adventure continued. But she finally settled in Australia, but it's a great story of resilience, of adventure and of love. So I hope you enjoy episode 2.
And there was a crash on the chicken wire, and I looked up and it was over my bed, and there was a colobus monkey. We saw Mount Etna erupting as we went into the Suez Canal.
Did you pick up any other languages along the way?
Swahili, when we were children. We used to sit round the cook fires with the families of the staff at the back of the house, and we used to clatter away in kitchen Swahili, we called it, because ungrammatical.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, having a chat. It's great. Where we generally like to start is at the beginning, and you're from the UK?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about the early years and what you remember from your childhood?
Well, there weren't any early years in the UK because Mum and I, when I was 6 weeks old, sailed for the Falklands.
Oh, so straight away? I thought you might have lived in England for a while and then moved, but straight away? Yeah,
Dad had already started his new posting. He worked for the Colonial Service, and he'd sailed a few weeks earlier to Port Stanley, and our home ended up being in Darwin for a while, and gosh, I've got a blank.
So you went straight to the Falklands? That was your first trip?
Yes.
Yeah.
So via Montevideo, we changed ships to that little steamer there, and that was a sheep boat. It had sheep and wool on it, and a few passengers.
And obviously you were only 6 weeks old, so you wouldn't have memories of this, but you've been told, you've seen the photos, you've been told what it was like.
I don't have any real memories of my own of the Falklands at all, and I was 3 when we left.
Right, so you were still really young when you left. What was next after the Falklands?
Back to England, and Dad studied tropical medicine for a while. And then in 1951, we set sail for East Africa.
So you were 3 years old when you went across to Africa?
Yeah. No, I was 4.
4 by then?
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's still really early, but any memories from that sort of time?
A few. I remember Aden and going out in a glass-bottomed boat.
Oh, wow.
And to look at the corals and the fish.
Yeah.
Beautiful fish, I remember to this day.
That's amazing you can remember that so vividly.
Yeah.
It
was wonderful.
So this is going into Africa now?
Yeah.
So
we saw Mount Etna erupting as we went into the Suez Canal.
And you remember that?
Vaguely.
Yeah, you would remember.
Spoke about it more, so I don't know how much is her memory and how much.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Yeah. What was that? Was that quite a sight? I'm assuming seeing that happen.
I suppose it was. Didn't make much of an impression on me.
And how long in Africa did you spend?
We were there from 51 through to 62.
So a bit of time there.
Yeah.
And so whereabouts in Africa?
First of all, in Ginger. We lived near a big dam on the Nile where it joins Lake Victoria.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was Dad's first posting for a year. And then we went to Entebbe, which is also on the shores of Lake Victoria.
So do you know what country that was in
Uganda.
Oh, Uganda. Yeah. Right. One of the best things I've ever done was I did an overland safari to Africa. So it was about 50 days, but started in Kenya, went to Uganda and saw gorillas in the jungle. That was the most amazing thing ever. And then we went down through some countries down to South Africa. So I had an amazing time. But it must have been a very different experience living there in those years.
Yeah. And there were 3 separate communities in our town. European, Indian and African. And Dad looked after everybody.
Your dad looked after everyone?
Yes, well, in Entebbe, he was the GP at the hospital there.
Yeah.
It was just a small hospital with his surgery and one small operating theatre.
Yeah.
And a sister and some nurses. So it was a very small hospital as such, but he used to be on call all the time.
Yeah. And so this travel, this was because he was in the forces?
No, colonial service, British colonial service.
Right, okay. And then people in that would then go and travel to the different countries?
Yes, and undertake their jobs for a period of time.
Wow.
And counting the Falklands, I was 15 when we left Uganda, so it's 15 years that he had in different countries.
What did your mum think about this?
She was all for it. She was up
great.
for anything.
Yeah.
And the Falklands were a shock, apparently, because there were peat stoves, no wood, no trees anywhere apart from Port Stanley, where there were imported trees, very few.
Yes.
But it was all tussocks and rocks, the Falklands.
So she didn't, there's a bit of a shock to go to end up in there.
And there's a picture there on that one of the stack of peat that she had to dig up and then get to burn. And
right.
she said
so a different way of life
she was
all of a
crap
sudden.
at that.
Yeah, right.
So she had a lady called Aggie who used to look after the house and help with the peat stove. And
Right.
there were a lot of wonderful women there who helped Mum through everything.
Didn't she just love that lifestyle?
She just settled in.
Yeah.
She was used to travel with her family and living in some odd places. So it was no big deal to her. East Africa was a much better deal as far as modern appliances was concerned and cars and things.
Yeah.
There were very few cars, mostly Jeep-type vehicles in the Falklands because there weren't any roads throughout the islands. So Dad had to ride on those horses there.
Yeah.
He'd never ridden before in his life. And
how did he get on with that?
The residents called him out because they wanted to check out their new doctor.
Hang on, was he going out to see people as a GP on horseback?
On horseback.
Oh.
The Falklands are 2 big islands and a few small ones in between.
Yeah.
So it involved horseback ride across the big island and then sheep boat across
That's amazing.
Choiseul Sound.
Wow.
And then to West Falkland.
Quite a life as a GP. Doing that.
Yeah. And it was wonderful. And he said that he was a mailman and a dentist and an obstetrician.
A bit of everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
To these outlying people. And plenty of kitchen table surgery.
He must have been really highly regarded by everyone.
I think he was, but he was just one of several. The next person who took over from him 3 years later would have had to do the same.
Right.
But I believe they've got more roads now since the Falklands War.
Yeah, it would have changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're not on horseback anymore in the Falklands.
Oh, I don't know. A lot of the place was only suitable to ride
Yeah.
on a horse around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, you were very young in the Falklands, so more memories from Uganda. Is it all fond memories for you? Is it all, you look back on that at a good
For
time?
me, it was all good. For all of us, it was all good.
Yeah.
And a scary time was when Mum and Dad had to decide whether to send us to school in England once we were needing secondary school, because there was only primary school in Entebbe.
Yeah.
And it was either England or Kenya. And the Mau Mau was going on at the time. I don't know if you've heard of the Mau Mau
No, I can ask that.
emergency. It was a dangerous time for anybody who lived in Kenya, either,
So stay
black
safe,
or
safe
white.
let's go.
Yes, it was a horrible time.
Yeah.
But anyway, by the time I was old enough to go to boarding school, and my brother went to his boarding school in Nairobi a year before I did, by the time we were old enough to go, things were settled down. And I just remember the happiest time.
So where did you end up going boarding school?
The first one to finish my primary education was Greenstead's school, which it used to be a farm, and the owners of Greenstead's farm moved it across the Rift Valley. We were right in the Rift Valley in Nakuru,
Yeah.
the school I'm talking about, and we lived in the old farm, and the buildings were cow buyers, ex-cow buyers, and all sorts of farm.
Yeah, farm-related people and jobs, yeah.
That's right. My dormitory was a cow buyer, and then a floor had been put in, a wooden floor,
Yeah.
but no glass on the windows. We had massive square windows with chicken wire.
Right.
And for nighttime and bad weather, canvas blinds that rolled down on the outside.
Wow.
So it was like being in I imagine, one of those clippers, the ships,
Yeah.
canvas slapping.
Flapping in the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And mozzies everywhere. So we all had mozzie nets.
Yeah.
Yeah. One day I was supposed to be on the sports field with everyone else, but I was back in the dormitory getting something, and it was very quiet, just me. And there was a crash on the chicken wire.
Yeah.
And I looked up, and it was over my bed, and there was a colobus monkey.
I was
Beautiful.
It was written on here, colobus monkeys. I was keen to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So I just jumped on the...
It was hanging on,
Yeah.
and it was just looking at me with these big brown eyes. For ages, it seemed like ages.
Yeah.
And then I didn't move. I just was blown away by this. And then he just flashed away.
How big? Are they quite small, those ones?
This
Oh, no, quite
one
big.
was small, quite about that big.
Yeah. Did you have many interactions with animals and wildlife in Uganda?
I'm in Kenya now at school.
Right.
Not so much in Uganda, although we did have a game department in Entebbe.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've looked in the garden there, those flower pots, giant,
Yeah, the big ones,
about bigger than this table,
Yeah.
concrete things with some water in it, and about 100 snapping little baby crocodiles.
Oh, wow.
In each of them, there were 2 of those.
Yeah.
And then there was a huge enclosure full of different monkeys
Yeah.
and a baby elephant, I remember, and an 18-foot python in a chicken wire cage.
Yeah.
You'd think that chicken wire wouldn't keep much in, but anyway.
Oh, great things to see as a youngster. Yeah.
And they had a lot of embryos of hippos and things like that in the locked up part of the thing. We could go in and see that, but yeah.
What were they like at the boarding schools? Were they strict? Were they nice? Or how was it?
They were lovely. I can't speak for my brother's experience at St Mary's because it was Catholic fathers, and I think on the whole he was very happy.
Yeah.
I loved my school, and it was co-ed, and the boys and the girls had separate matrons, and it was just really wonderful. And the food was fantastic. You wouldn't think so at school food, but
Yeah, most people complain about school food.
Yeah.
So they were serving up some good stuff.
yes, they were.
Yeah.
The same thing every week, every day of the week.
Right.
It was, like fish on Friday and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But very good.
Was it just you and your brother?
No, my sister was born in 1951.
Right.
And just as we were coming, just before we set sail for East Africa, she was born. And then I had a younger brother born in 55 in Entebbe.
Okay, so there's 4 of you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all
okay.
born in different countries.
Oh, how good's that?
It was exciting. And half term one time, we were taken to see Lake Nakuru. Have you seen those on those nature shows?
I've seen it in person.
Have you?
Yeah, that's that just massive lake that you stand in.
Yes,
Yeah.
from flamingos all the way around.
Yes, I did see it. My memory, I'm really bad at remembering places I've been and things like that. But yes, we definitely went to Lake Nakuru.
And we used to go by the busload during the half-term holidays.
Yeah.
And it was just the Uganda kids because we lived too far away to go home for half-term, but the rest of the kids went home.
Yeah.
So we had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
And they had wooden huts on stilts called blinds. And you could walk out there and stay very still, and the flamingos would come all the way around you.
Yeah, wow.
Forget you were there.
Yeah. Yeah, what a sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember they used to lay their eggs on a mound under the water because it was soda water,
Yeah.
and lay the egg on top, and it was just below the surface. Yeah. So we were taught to leave those strictly alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get flamingos chasing after you.
Yeah. And then whenever we jumped out of the blinds, they all took off in this pink cloud.
Yeah, wow.
It was wonderful.
So in terms of being a youngster and moving around, you would almost recommend that? Because the reason I ask that is because I'm from the UK, as you can probably hear, and I've got 3 young daughters. Yeah. But my wife and I have always said that we'd love to go back and live in London for a period of time and then maybe do travel around Europe. But there's obviously that need to factor in the fact that we'd be moving the kids around and moving them to different schools. And I guess I naturally worry about that. But I've spoken to quite a few people that have, when they were younger, they moved around a little bit and they loved it. Had the best adventures, character building and everything else. So
if you don't mind boarding school as well, I mean, lots of people have got opinions about boarding school.
Yeah.
They can be wonderful, they can be awful.
Again, I remember being scared. When I first heard about boarding schools, I remember being really scared because when Mum and Dad said, some kids go to schools where they live away from their family. And for me, that was like, I couldn't imagine that. That was so scary. But then I've spoken to so many people that have gone to boarding schools and they had a great time. Yeah. They loved it.
We always went home for the holidays, the long holidays. And half the excitement was travelling home overnight on the train, having your meals on the train.
So adventures on the train.
Yeah. And Mum, on 2 occasions, was a train escort.
Oh, what?
The different schools, there were probably 5 or 6 different schools. And so they had an escort for the children of those schools
for each school.
On the same train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your mum enjoyed doing that?
Mum loved it. You know, just was up for anything and made the best of stuff. Mind you, they'd just come through the Second World War, so they made do. And
I think people were really good at that, weren't they? Back in those days, just making the most of any situation.
Absolutely.
I think everyone now, they want entertaining, they want the best of everything, and that's what we're used to, making the most of what's around them.
Mum's first experience of shopping when she went to Entebbe was going to the local market. And there, your meat was chopped up on a tree stump, flies everywhere, all over it.
Very
but
rustic.
You just cooked it very well.
Yeah.
And it was perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And it was an African-run market. And the African ladies were lovely. They all wore their big dresses called basutis.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd sit down there, legs to one side, very daintily.
Yeah.
And they'd have little pyramids of tomatoes.
Yeah.
You know, things they'd grown in their garden. I love hearing Africans sing. And we had a huge garden in Entebbe, only half of which we could use, or maybe a third, at the front, which was kept by, we had a gardening guy.
Yeah.
Most of the back was this high in grass. And Dad used to book the PWD guys to come and slash it all to keep the snakes down.
Yeah.
Because we just galloped through, not looking for snakes. But I imagine that the noise that we made frightened them. But they'd have a long piece of metal like this, curved up and very sharp, and they'd just go.
That's the way through it. Yeah. That's great. What was next after that time in Africa for you?
When we left, Marty, my youngest brother, died there.
Okay.
So we went home to England briefly in 1960 for a while, and then Dad came back to finish his tour. And so we had to leave him behind in Entebbe.
Right.
And that was hard.
That was an upsetting time for you? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But anyway, we caught the boat train home to Mombasa and came home by ship.
Yeah.
This time round the Cape.
So a different experience on the way back?
Pretty much more of the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It was good fun.
Yeah.
And we stopped at Durban and changed ships to the Cape Town Castle. And Durban was nice. but sterile.
Yeah.
Things to see, but it was nice going down to Cape Town and climbing up Table Mountain and doing all those usual touristy things. And we had a fire on board the ship in the engine room in the middle of the Atlantic.
Was that scary?
Coming up. A little bit nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it would be a ship on fire in the ocean is generally quite scary, I'd imagine.
But they had it under control. And the Canary Islands, we stopped off there and then on to England. And England was very different by the time we got back.
You got back.
Yeah.
So what age were you then?
15.
It's crazy to think what you've experienced at 15 compared to an average kid that's probably in England and stayed same town, same school.
Yeah.
And you've done all these things and seen these things. Yeah, great adventures and stories. Yeah.
But life went on in England for a while and we finished our schooling and Mike joined the army, I joined the army, and we had our postings within the army.
So you went travelling in the army yourself then?
Yes. My first posting was to a military hospital up in Catterick in Yorkshire.
So this was nursing you were doing?
Queen Alexandra's Royal Army Nursing Corps. And Mike was in the Royal Engineers. He mostly was swimming for the army. I understand that he didn't do his job that he did an apprenticeship for very long. He got involved with the swimming team. I went to Catterick, to the military hospital there, and then on to Cyprus to BMH Decalia.
Right.
A British military hospital, and had 18 months there, and then came back to Catterick. And then I was demobbed because I was getting married. And in those days, if you got married, if girls got married or got pregnant, it was out.
That was it?
Nowadays, they don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Imagine the money wasted on our training up to that point, just to be got rid of. But they
So
didn't.
were you happy to come out of the army or were you...
I was getting married. It was exciting. It's a new phase of life. So I was sad to leave the army, and I've always loved the army, but I didn't actually leave it because I married a soldier, and he was in Arborfield, Salisbury, down near Salisbury. And then we got a posting to Germany, and we had 4 years in Germany.
Wow,
And
so you really have moved
Germany.
around and spent time in other countries.
Yeah.
So fond memories of Germany?
Yes. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Did you pick up any other languages along the way?
Swahili, when we were children, we used to sit round the cook fires with the families of the staff at the back of the house. They'd be going on and on. Yeah. And we used to clatter away in kitchen Swahili, we called it, because ungrammatical.
Yeah.
I switched to the Swahili program on the TV occasionally.
So you can still speak something or a lot of it, understand?
I can only recognise about one word in 1,000 now.
Oh, there's still something at least. Yeah.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah. But no, Dad had to learn it because he had to be able to communicate with his staff at the hospital.
Yeah.
Mum had to be able to talk to the staff at home. And so they learned very quickly. Mum was the only one who actually had Swahili lessons.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you learn any German while you were there for those 4 years?
Very little. I'm ashamed to say the Army Education Corps put on German for beginners and advanced German. But it was always at night, and I had a small baby.
No, so
I wasn't a driver then.
Yeah.
No, I gave it a miss. But I used to try it out in the shops. But everybody answered me in English anyway.
How did you end up in Australia?
My mum and her second husband followed his son out to Australia. And that gave us the idea 3 years before we left Germany, why don't we emigrate? And we put that in progress.
Yeah. Okay.
And we came out in 1972.
And never any thoughts of going back once you were here? That was it?
I missed England, and I especially missed the army very much.
Yeah.
My husband didn't miss the army as much as me. He was gainfully employed eventually at the tracking station outside Canberra. And I've always missed it, but I went back in 1999 for 1 month and got that all out of my system.
Went back to the UK?
Yes.
All right, okay.
Stayed with my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then was there anything particularly you did in that 1 month that you wanted to?
I just wanted to see him,
Yeah.
and he lived in Reading at that time. I know nothing about Reading. So he showed me all around Pilgrim's Way and all those wonderful places.
Yeah.
Into London, all the places that we'd known when we were children.
Again, all super different.
Hastings.
Oh,
yes.
you said Hastings Castle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went there a couple of times when I was younger. That used to be great.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We lived in the old town of Hastings,
Oh, right.
in All Saints Street, after we got back from Uganda. And because that was one place we'd gone on leave from Uganda. Every 3 years, we had 6 months home leave. And so Hastings, just by a lucky chance, and we all loved it. So we went back there in 62 after leaving the colonial service. Dad retired after that. And it was a wonderful place.
Was Australia what you expected?
Yes, it was. I really didn't have any preconceived ideas. It was all new. And like Mum, we were all used to new places, and our families spread over the world, as well as partially in Australia. So, we didn't mind. We started off in Bairnsdale in Victoria.
Oh, you started in Victoria?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Mum and Pop were living there.
Right.
And they put us up for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then we moved up to Canberra 3 months later. By then I was expecting my daughter.
Okay.
And she was born in Queanbeyan.
Okay. And then eventually you came to Sydney?
Yes, because I was living by myself in the end and unable to manage even the front doorstep. With my daughter's help, I got a place here.
Right. Okay.
And that was nearly 3 years ago, I think.
Okay. You've got 2 children, and I think you're very proud of them. And you said that on the sheet that you filled in, just said that lots of memories. You love thinking back to time with them. Is there anything that stands out for you?
Other than Aaron always hurting himself, he'd go off on his bike and come home smashed up.
Yeah, okay.
On one occasion, he'd ridden into the back of a parked car.
Oh, no.
And gone right over it.
So this was him, was it? Just constantly out doing things and hurting himself?
When he was a tiny baby, he wasn't even crawling. In Germany, he hopped about on his bum, and he I don't know how he worked it out, but he was near a power point. It had 2 holes for the plug and no on-off switch. It was just those 2 holes.
Yeah.
And for some reason, he thought, I know what will fit in there, one of Mum's knitting needles.
Oh, no.
And I had them in the sitting room. So he must have hopped on his bottom.
So back on his bum. Yeah.
Got the knitting needle, hopped back, and next thing I knew, I was in the bedroom. I heard this little scream, and he poked it in there, and it was still sticking out of there.
Oh, no.
And he was so lucky not to be electrocuted.
Oh, so he didn't get a shock?
No, he got a shock.
But nothing too major?
No. And I had a Hoover twin tub to do the washing. They always had a wooden thing to...
Tongs, hopefully, yep.
I got the wooden handled tongs and I pulled it out of the thing.
So they got covered up, did it?
It got covered up and the knitting needles reorientated. Yeah. But that's the sort of thing that used to happen to him.
Yeah, always keeping you on your toes.
Always. And now he's got a job that's got its dangers.
What does he do?
In an oil refinery. He's a Boilermaker welder.
Yeah.
And he is tank maintenance, oil tank maintenance.
Yeah.
And I rang him this week. There was an explosion in one of the tanks across the river, he said. That there are tanks both sides of the Brisbane River, I suppose.
Yeah. So
and,
you still sit there expecting to get a call home. So
I do. I touch wood all the time.
Well, I've got the young children. I thought hopefully that stops that worry about them all the time. It just keeps going, does it?
Mm.
Okay. All right. Something to.
And he's 55.
I've got a few years ahead of me of the worry then.
Yeah, I remember the holidays, the school holidays. I could only ever afford one outing. for all of us because we were on our own. I was divorced by then.
Yeah.
And we used to go in the bus over to Canberra, have lunch out and have enough left for afternoon tea, go to a movie, buy some rubbish,
So it's
and
a really
come
fun
home
day.
on the bus.
Yeah, nice,
and we had a wonderful time.
Just lots of fond memories of just you and the
just
kids.
simple things like that.
Yeah. Wow. What's this about them play pranks on you and things?
Oh, they tease me.
They tease you, right?
Yeah.
I do that
I
to my
think
parents, actually.
I got a birthday card from Aaron a couple of years ago with 2 meerkats sitting up going, ooh, I can see an old person. I love all that stuff. I love having my...
Yeah, so you're happy for them to tease you and that
yanked.
kind of stuff. Yeah, I do it to my parents a little bit as well. It's always fun doing.
They're very cheeky to me, very cheeky.
Yeah, well, you touched on before that you came here 3 years ago. Is that right?
I think it's about 3 years, isn't it, Trey?
Maybe 4.
Yeah.
Right. One thing we wanted to do with this podcast was, because obviously we're coming in speaking to aged care residents, and maybe a bit of advice or help for anyone that might be coming into aged care for the first time, or some families that are putting loved ones into aged care. How was that transition for you into aged care?
It was fine. I mean, we had Trish, and she's our mum.
Right. Yeah.
But the staff were always fantastic and listen and do things for you,
Yeah.
And my daughter was a big help. Aaron's too far away.
Yeah.
So it's down to Lenny settling me in and...
Doing a bit of research and finding the best
she did
place.
all of that.
Yeah.
I just had to lie back and relax.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. Look, thanks so much for coming on and having a chat. It's been great. I've loved hearing the stories of all that travel you did and all the places you saw and all the things you did at such a young age. One question we always like to ask at the end, if you could go back in time and speak to your, I normally say 16-year-old self, but is there any advice you'd give to yourself when you were young? When you were 16, you'd already done everything. You'd already experienced so much.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Try to be more confident.
Okay. A bit more confidence, but yeah. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great. Yeah, some really good stories. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.